Hi, thanks for joining us for the Family Plot, Gardening in the Mid-South. I'm Chris Cooper. Snakes do a great job controlling pests, but some may be venomous. Also, water-wise gardening not only saves water, but keeps you from having to go outside as much on hot days. That's just ahead on the Family Plot, Gardening in the Mid-South.
Production funding for the Family Plot, Gardening in the Mid-South is provided by Goodwin's Landscape and Garden Center in Germantown since 1943 and continuing to offer its plants for successful gardening with 7 greenhouses and 3 acres of plants, plus comprehensive landscape services. International Paper Foundation, the WKNO Production Fund, the WKNO Endowment Fund, and by viewers like you. Thank you.
Welcome to the Family Plot. I'm Chris Cooper. Joining me today is Andy Williams. Andy is the manager at Lichterman Nature Center, and Joellen Diamond is here. Joellen is a TSU Extension agent in Tipton County. Thanks for being here.
Good to be here.
All right, so Andy, you brought something for us to see.
I brought a lot to see and a lot to talk about.
Okay.
When you approached me about doing today's show, you said, well, let's talk about snakes. And so I did bring an animal ambassador, but I want to talk about snake bites and why people fear snakes.
Okay.
Snakes evoke probably the most extreme emotional response of any of our education animals.
Okay.
And a lot of it's hyped on TV, folklore, back in the Old Testament, Adam and Eve and the snake and all. Snakes do a good job of ridding your garden of pests, but there are some issues with venomous snakes that may have been overhyped.
Okay.
Now, one thing I do want to put out a disclaimer, the information we're going to talk about this morning has to do with snakes in the Memphis area.
Okay, good.
If you get outside the Memphis area, particularly other parts of the world, the attributes of venomous snakes can be different in important ways.
Okay, good.
But to put it into context, about 45,000 people in the United States get bitten by snakes every year, over a huge country. Of those, probably 6,000 or 7,000 people are bitten by venomous snakes. And then of those, only 5 or 6 people die. Of course, it's still tragic, but still, it gives you an idea of the scale of it.
Right.
When talking to students about snakes, first thing the students will say, well, we're afraid we'll get bitten. Well, of course, anything with a mouth can bite you.
Right.
But you get a show of hands of how many people in the room have been bitten by a little brother or sister. You get a big show of hands.
Right.
No one in the room typically has ever been bitten by a snake or knows anyone, but still, people fear, and rightly so, getting bitten by a snake. Memphis, as far as venomous snakes go, is not too bad a place to be. We have 4 types of venomous snakes that tend to that are possible in our area.
Okay.
One of them, 2 of them are rattlesnakes. This is a timber rattlesnake and a pygmy rattlesnake, but there really aren't a lot of rattlesnakes in the Memphis area. They tend to be more forest and that sort of stuff.
Okay.
And that's good news because of the snake deaths in the United States. So the 5 or 6 people who do die of snake bites, it's typically a rattlesnake.
Wow.
Common area, though, are copperheads and water moccasins. And I brought freeze dried. This is an adult copperhead, and I brought a mount that shows some different types of snakes, including a young copperhead. Copperheads are probably the most frequent source of snake bites and that sort of stuff, but people rarely die of their bites. Cottonmouths may chase you. They live near water and such.
Wow.
But as far as people gardening and all that sort of stuff in Memphis, provided you don't have a pond or swamp in your backyard, a copperhead is probably the one you're most likely to run into.
Okay.
But even though I'm getting ready to give you some information that if you can tell this information, you're too close, but a couple tips how the difference between venomous and non-venomous snakes. One of the most characteristic in our area have to do with looking at the heads. Venomous snakes have elliptical pupils like cat eyes. Non-venomous snakes have round pupils. Also, their heads are narrow. Venomous snakes' head are arrow-shaped. And the reason they're arrow-shaped, actually their venom glands are modified salivary glands, and venom's a modified form of saliva. If you can look under their tail, you'll see under the anal plate, venomous snakes have a single line of scales, whereas non-venomous have a double line. And if you are lucky enough, in my parlance, to find a snake shed in your backyard, you can tell if it's venomous or non-venomous by looking at the tail.
Okay. Wow.
But again, that gives you an idea what you have around. But if you can tell these things, you may be too close. I did bring an animal ambassador. This is a speckled king snake. This is the most common king snake in our area. There's 7 subspecies of king snakes. This is one, but again, it's the most common. They're called king snakes. One of their favorite foods are other snakes. They're said to be immune to the venom, and they have special techniques of latching onto the head of venomous snakes to keep them from getting bitten.
Okay.
But like other snakes, they are secretive. They hang out in the same sort of areas, and they're well adapted for hunting. They also eat lizards, mice, a wide variety of other things.
So they're helping us out.
All snakes help us out. And in fact, one of the things that attracts snakes in the area, if you have mice and that sort of stuff, they pick up on that and come to come in search of food. But if you run into a snake in the wild, rather than getting in close to look at the eyes or the tail, really your best bet is to step back slowly 3 feet, and typically the snake will scamper away. Snakes are attracted to motion and that sort of stuff. But in any case, in the wild, you want to put some distance between yourself and the snake.
Okay.
However, if you do see a snake, like I said, it's common sense, but don't pick it up. Other people who get bitten by snakes, 40 to 50% of them actually pick the snake up.
Oh my goodness.
And are honestly surprised when they get bitten.
Right, sure.
But unfortunately, if you do get bitten by non-venomous or venomous snakes, you want to take some certain precautions.
Okay.
Even a non-venomous snake bite, you can get lacerations from the teeth. They have needle-sharp teeth that point backwards. Okay. And so, if you pull, you could actually injure the snake if you pull out. But if you get bitten by a venomous snake, the first thing to do is to get away from the snake. Again, that should be common sense.
Yeah, it should be.
But if you get bit by a snake, thanks to all the hype on TV, books, so forth and so on, the first symptom of a snake bite is this overwhelming fear. And that's not caused by the bite or the venom, it's caused by your over-emotional response to be bitten by a snake. Sure. And then if you do, unfortunately, get bitten by a venomous snake, your rapid pulse rate and all like that from getting excited about the situation will make your symptoms worse. But you want to get away from the snake, see if you can identify it, but the main thing is to get away from it, to elevate the part that gets bitten around the area of your heart. You want to remove any rings or watches, anything because you probably will swell up if it's not a dry bite. And by the way, 25% of even venomous snake bites, particularly adults, they don't use all their venom. They have a good amount of control. If they're hunting for food, they just use little. But unfortunately, if they're being defensive, if you step on them or they think you're going to corner them, they will use more venom. But you elevate it, you wrap it loosely, and get medical attention just as quickly as you can. Okay. One thing I learned this in camp, and it was fun about this, but we've been taught over time that you're supposed to put an X on it with razors, suck the venom out, apply a tourniquet, and that sort of stuff. And we now know that all that's the wrong thing to do. Okay. Again, the most important thing is to seek medical attention and tell them what you know about the experience, and let the trained professionals do the rest on that.
Yeah. So sucking out the venom and that stuff that we see on TV.
But everything about snakes, particularly snake bites, are serious and should be taken seriously. But it's not a death sentence, except for just a handful of the cases that come up.
Okay. All right. Well, Andy, we appreciate that good information.
Well, thank you.
And hopefully we won't be scared of snakes.
Exactly.
They're our friends. Thanks. There are a number of gardening events going on in the next couple of weeks. Here are just a few that might interest you. All right, Joellen, it's hot.
It's July.
It's July. And folks, I don't know if they really want to go out there and water their plants. So can we help them out? You can give them a few ideas?
Yeah, and something that they can do right away. One of the first things that you can do, if you haven't already done this, is mulch. Simply putting some mulch on the ground will help retain moisture in the soil, and it also will help keep the temperature more stable for the roots of your plants. It can also help, when it degrades, it'll add nutrients to the soil. And of course, it prevents that crust, because sometimes when the water hits the soil surface, it puts a little crust layer on the soil. And then when it rains again, that layer is so tight that it lets water run off rather than soak in the ground. And mulch helps prevent all of that. So mulching is a great idea. Another thing that you can do to help yourself and your plants is to water either in the morning or in the evening before the sun sets. You've got to let the flowers and the leaves dry off before the sun sets, because that's going to set a perfect scenario for diseases to set in. So you want to prevent that. But watering in the morning and watering in the evening is a nicer time of day. It's cooler. Morning is the best if you can do that. But, you know, with people hectic schedules and trying to get to work, as long as you water in the evening before the sun sets so that leaves can dry off, that's a good time to water. Another thing you can do is plant groups of plants together that require the same types of water requirements. And you'll know, how do you know you've done that? Well, if you have a container or an area, then you've planted a whole different kinds of plants in there, you water them, and then some of them die. Well, they didn't like that much water, or you don't water them enough, and some of them lived and some of them didn't live because you didn't water enough. Well, you'll know that the water requirements for that particular plant that didn't live is not conducive to the other plants that you've planted it with. Good examples for some dry kind of flowers and plants that can take drought would be like your dusty millers and your lantanas. Also, there's some grass called Mexican feathergrass. It does really well with dry areas. Then, of course, for larger trees, you got your hollies. Anything with, you got to think thick leafed. Anything that has got a thick leaf on it, like your Indian hawthorns and your magnolias and your hollies, those all can take some drought because they have thicker leaves on them. A lot of herbs can do that too. You think of your sages and your oreganos and your rosemaries and the bay leaf. All of those can take a more drought situation because they have larger, thicker leaves. Let's see. Also, Memphis area is very humid.
Yes, it is.
And
without a doubt.
I don't like putting water in the air to water things. If you can use soaker hoses, that would be the best thing that you can do, because it puts water right on the root zone where the plants need it. And you will save yourself money and time by having soaker hoses, and just all you have to do is go out and hook up a soaker hose and come back in, and then 30 minutes later go out and check, and you know, maybe give it another 30 minutes or not, and you're done. And you don't have to stand there and water anything. So if you can use some kind of system that puts as large particles of water as possible out, you're not going to be evaporating a lot of it in the heat, so you're not going to make Memphis any more humid than it already is. But yes, and you'll save yourself money in the long run because you won't have to use so much water.
Right.
And now, if you have some time, when you are planting, I highly recommend adding organic matter to the soil, because soils here in this area are very small in size, and they are very tightly held together. So there's not a lot of air and water movement and space for the roots to even grow. So if you amend the soil, organic matter will break that up and give you larger areas to hold water, roots, and air movement. So you're going to do a better job for yourself, save yourself some time in the long run, and not use as much water if you have water that stays in the ground a lot longer, and organic matter will help you do that.
Yes, I can hear Mr. Jim Voges in my head right now. Poor space. You know, that's what we need.
Yes, what
poor
we need.
Space.
And organic matter will help you do that.
Yeah. Okay.
It sure will.
Now let's go back to the mulches for a second. So do you prefer one over another?
It depends on what it is and where it's at. I tend to like mulches that are going to stay on the ground for a lot longer, and that's like your cypress and your cedar mulches, because you don't have to spend more money to add more mulch to the soil. And I usually put those in areas that I have already finished, and I'm not going to be digging in those areas anymore. Another thing, if you've got slopes, you got to watch, and you don't want something that's going to run. So
Yeah.
pine needles tend to really do well on slopes and hold the soil and all the plants and everything. So that's, I would prefer that. It depends on the situation is
Okay,
what
sure.
mulch I would prefer to put on there.
Yeah, think about the pine needles and the slopes. Okay. All right. Makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay. And you did mention about using the soaker hoses because you don't want that foliage to be wet.
No.
With the overhead watering, which I see a lot in the evening,
Yes.
in my own neighborhood. It's just prime setup for, fungal diseases and things like that. So we don't want people to do that.
And if you're really good, then you'll put the soaker hoses down and then mulched on top of them, so that you got even. And then the sunlight, it'll look better. The sunlight won't degrade the soaker hose, and they can stay in there for years and years and years and years.
And I do like the whole idea of grouping plants together water requirements. I think that's pretty smart.
Yeah. Yeah, and it works. And they all look good. There's a lot of plants that like succulents, for example, very popular right now. And they don't take a whole lot of water, and they look great. So,
Of course, I have to throw in native plants. Once they're
Native
acclimated
plants.
and well established, tend to respond favorably to the amount of water we get in our area.
yes, they do.
Okay.
And they can take more of our soils, too, which is good.
Yeah, that's a good thing. All right, Joella, we appreciate that information. All right.
You're welcome.
All right, so we're gonna take a look at this watermelon. As you can see, the bottom of it has blossom end rot. And what that pretty much means is that calcium is not moving throughout this plant. And this is also an indicator of a calcium deficiency. So this is the importance of doing a soil test. You do a soil test, you find out how much calcium is in the soil. If you need to add calcium, please do that. But the major problem with this is you need more moisture consistency. You need a more consistent watering regime, which is why it's always good to mulch, because that mulch helps regulate soil moisture. So either you're giving it too much water or you're not giving it enough water. So add mulch, and that would help with your moisture control. You're not going to be able to correct the problem that you have here now, but you will be able to save those other watermelons. So again, this is blossom end rot, moisture control, and calcium is not moving throughout the plant like it should. All right, so here's our Q&A session. And Andy, you jump in there and help us out, okay?
Sure.
All right, here's our first viewer email. With all the rain this spring, every acorn that fell in my yard germinated. My lawn is full of 4 or 5 inch shoots. I kept my flower beds cleaned out until I left for town for about a week. Now I can hardly find my bedding plants. Am I destined to live in an urban forest? Here's a related question. I have huge trees and hundreds of saplings in my yard. For the last 2 years, my leaves were mulched instead of raked. What caused all the tree saplings to grow, and how do I get rid of them? So the first question is from Miss Jane, and the second question, Miss Marilyn here in Shelby County. It kind of related. So,
Yeah.
Urban forest, is she destined to live in an urban area?
Well, if she let them all grow, yes, there would be, quite a lot of trees growing in the same place. But like the trees and the saplings that are coming up the lawn, just spray a broadleaf weed killer on that, and that should take care of those. In the beds, well, you know what? We've just had a really good acorn year this last year. So I think that's why we're seeing more acorns coming up in beds, especially if they got covered up a little bit, just if they got covered up just a little bit through the fall and over winter, and that's prime time for them to all start germinating and coming up at the same time. Digging them up, putting some kind of herbicide on them is your best bet, but you just have to watch what kind of plants you're around.
Okay, Andy, anything to add to that?
Yeah, that's one of my favorite topics. Actually, believe it or not, we were talking about this at the dinner table with my in-laws.
Oh, how about
they had
that?
exactly
Okay.
the same thing. And they have fescue, and they were concerned about even a broadleaf thing in the hot weather, and fescue were a bad
It would be tough.
combination.
Yeah, sure would
And
be.
so the viewers won't like this solution, but my in-laws' solution is to spend 15 minutes when they get home, each of them, and pulling up the seedlings.
Right.
My personal solution in my woodland garden, out in the dead of winter after the acorns drop, typically it's a good thing to do on a cold day, January, February, and that sort of stuff, to rake. The acorns, your plants are dormant, you rake them onto a hard surface, and then you can take a broom and dustpan and actually get rid of them. Now I do set them aside for the wild animals and that sort of stuff, but
Okay.
even when they don't sprout and become nuisance seedlings, they're like, particularly on sidewalks and like that, they're like little ball bearings, and you can slip, and they're a safety hazard. But raking, sweeping them up, to me, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure.
That's right. Okay, I can get with that. And it's something else I do because I actually have, some of these acorns that will sprout in my flower beds. We've had enough rain; they're easy to pull up. Okay, that's one thing. And then in my yard, I actually mow them down because it depletes the carbohydrates. Of course, in an acorn over time. So eventually, peters out. For the most part.
They'll go away.
So yeah, I either pull them up or I just I mow them in my lawn.
But if you snap them up, there's enough energy left in the seedling, unless you do resort to herbicide or you keep chopping, you're gradually reducing the energy store over time.
Right, you're depleting the carbohydrates, so that works. All right, so Miss Jane, Miss Marilyn, I hope that helps you out. All right, here's our next viewer email. I have several tall Leyland cypress that are turning brown from the inside out. As in, the insides of all the branches are turning brown and dropping, but the outside leaves are fine so far. Can I save my Leyland cypress, or should I just cut them down and start over with something different? And this is from Jeff. Joel, I know you chomping at the bits to get at this one.
Well, if it's just dying on the inside, it's probably just because they're getting larger and there's not enough light to support needles on the inside of the tree.
Okay.
So there's really nothing wrong with them. Now, he doesn't say whether he's got a lot of shade or a lot of sun. He doesn't say if there's sections dying out.
Right.
Because if there are large sections dying out, that's that Ceridium canker that Leyland cypress get, and there is no cure for that.
There is no cure. That's right.
So yes, if you have that, then you're going to want to replace them with something. But if they're just dying from the inside and the outside looks perfectly fine, they're just getting large and they're not getting light inside to produce needles.
And if you, let me channel my inner Carol Reese for a second, she would tell you not to plant a monoculture, of these type of plant materials, because Ceridium canker, as we well know here in Shelby County, is pretty much taking out the cypress, the Leyland cypress. Ceridium canker is doing that. Of course, the canker, interferes with water movement or water flow up the plant. So yeah, if you get sections that die out, it's not coming back from that.
No.
Right, so you have to take out the plant material. But, you have some good questions that we need to ask, Mr. Jeff, and figure out what the problem is.
Right.
All right. So, Mr. Jeff, if you call the Extension office in Tipton County or Shelby County, we're more than happy, to come out and take a look at it, see what's going on. All right. So here's our next viewer email. My brother in Maryland has a tremendous problem with stink bugs. They have invaded his home inside, and he has used traps outside, insecticides, and simply catching them on tissue and flushing them down the toilet, Andy. So what can you do to get rid of stink bugs in your house? And this is from Roger in Milan. So he wants to get rid of stink bugs in the house.
Well, go back to the ounce of prevention, pound of cure. You've got to seal the ways they're getting into the house.
Exactly.
Typically, they come to the house to overwinter, or they like to go up to attics and that sort of stuff. The smashing with the toilet tissues, I have no problem with natural killing things, but they stink.
Yes.
So you're going to get that all over you and that sort of stuff. If you have to endorse it, they're weak because they've come into overwinter, and particularly in Maryland, they have a longer winter there, and so they stay inside, so they're weak from not eating for months. But I would recommend, if you can, put a liner in a shop vac, not your house vacuum, but one you use for utility, and put like a shop rag or something for the insects to attach to, and then you can suck them up.
Okay.
You're still going to get some of the odor, but you can contain it in that, and it won't permanently mar your equipment. You can kill them pretty easily with water. They're really weak when they're inside, but the best thing to do is to keep them from getting inside your house.
I would agree with that, Joella.
Yeah, that's what I would think.
Yeah.
The other thing I was going to say is also try to keep the shrubbery and weed population down around your house, because that attracts them. They see plants that they can eat, and then they'll, oh, this is a nice warm house to go into. So if you can keep the shrubs trimmed and the weeds down around the house, that will help prevent them from attracting to your house too. Sure.
And again, there are some exterior, controls that you can use using the insecticides. They're not as good. Again, they're pyrethroids for the most part. But yeah, sealing cracks and crevices is what I would recommend.
Also, if you apply insecticide successfully, if you use safe ones, they're going to go away over time. And so you forget about it, and before you know it, you've got the bugs back again.
Yeah. All right. Mr. Roger, so there you have it.
Yeah.
So Andy, Joel, we're out of time. Thanks for being here.
Oh, my pleasure.
Good.
All right. Remember, we love to hear from you. Send us an email or letter. The email address is familyplot@wkno.org, and the mailing address is Family Plot, 7151 Cherry Farms Road, Cordova, Tennessee 38016. Or you can go online to familyplotgarden.com. That's all we have time for today. To get more information on things we talked about on today's show, go to familyplotgarden.com. You can also watch videos from past shows. Thanks for watching. I'm Chris Cooper. Be sure to join us next week for the Family Plot, Gardening in the Mid-South. Be safe.
Production funding for the Family Plot, Gardening in the Mid-South is provided by Good Winds Landscape and Garden Center in Germantown since 1943 and continuing to offer its plants for successful gardening with 7 greenhouses and 3 acres of plants, plus comprehensive landscape services. International Paper Foundation, the WKNO Production Fund, the WKNO Endowment Fund, and by viewers like you. Thank you.